Hello, everyone, and welcome to A Day in the Life. Today, we're joined by Thomas Chu, who is a co-founder, educator, and former director of product management. And I met Thomas at an IBM conference, actually. He and I both worked at IBM, and he oversaw the product management for the product I worked on. But he's in a completely different office and country than me, so we just hadn't seen each other until we'd gone to that conference. But now he's since gone on to start his own education company, and I'm really looking forward to catching up with him and learning about how that's going. Welcome, Thomas.
Rachel, I miss you.
Good,
How have you been?
good.
Oh,
Yeah,
it's been
can't
too long. It's
complain.
been too long. Yeah.
That's been too long.
Yeah.
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 I wanted to get started on here just
Sure.
talking about your past life at IBM. You were at IBM for quite some time. And what was your journey to get to IBM? And then just talk about your experience at IBM.
Yeah. So I can definitely talk about this a little bit. I don't know whether an hour is enough because I've been there 20 years. It was actually, I left 3 months ago, right after my 20th anniversary. It was a big decision, but we can talk about it later. It's pretty, it was a journey. I think there was a time that I studied in Canada, but after that, I moved back to Asia, and my parents still in Hong Kong at that time, and I worked there for several years until I got married and I have kids and decided to come back to Canada. Um, I wouldn't call myself a new immigrant, but I didn't really have a lot of Canadian experience at that time, and I was in a different industry. I was in the car industry at that time, so I wasn't able to really find a job very easily. But I'm very thankful that IBM has have faith in me. And despite, well, it was a dot-com boom, so they kind of hire everybody. Okay, but in any way, they hired me into that. And it was interesting that I learned about it later on in my career in IBM, that I talked to my hiring manager and also my second line hiring manager, who's a director at that time in the product. They told me that they actually have a pretty big debate about whether they hired me or not. There were a group of people against hiring me because I did not have the industry knowledge and things like that. So I'm thankful that I got hired at that time. And I think that, I think one of the most thankful thing that I want to tell everybody about working at IBM is that despite being a new immigrant, despite being a, a person coming from a different country, I didn't really speak a lot of English at that time. Okay. But I was never experienced any kind of discrimination, racism, or anything like that. I was given the opportunity. I was appreciated and respected. Even when I was the most junior person, I was in the software development team of the database product. People work like a family, and it was really, really good that they treated me just like everybody, and now given my fair share of experience and opportunity. And then obviously I work hard, okay, and there was a lot of growth at that time for the business. So I kind of ride the train along with everybody. So and then I got several opportunity. And when we talk about mentorship later on today, I'm really thankful that I met several people in these 20 years in IBM that I'm still talking to right now. They give me life advice. They give me some really, really important advice that helped me make some really important decisions throughout the journey. So it was really good. And obviously, being a technical person, I was coming from engineering background. The VP about 5 years ago actually asked me and invited me to become a product manager of the product that I've been developing and working for the last 15 years. So it was a great opportunity. I learned a lot on that too. So that was how I became a product manager. I wasn't really from that background strictly, but yeah, I'm thankful that I was given a lot of opportunity. And I think for anyone who want to come into this industry and joining, I think IBM will be one of the best company to work for. Okay, competitive, busy, tiring. And Rachel, that, I know that it's all like that because our industry is like that. But in terms of being treated fairly, being given great opportunity so that your work will be recognized, I think this is a fantastic opportunity, and I'm very thankful of what I had in the last 20 years.
Yeah, there's a lot there. Like, it's super interesting that you were able to talk to your previous hiring managers, and it's so great that you had people were willing to go to bat for you and bring you on. It's like
Mhm.
I don't think I've ever talked to a hiring manager before about like why they decided to hire me, but that's super
Yeah,
interesting.
it was a very interesting thing, and like, and I don't even mind sharing what happened in the job interview at that time. So I didn't really have a job or really like a professional big company job at that time. I have a friend who owns a car dealership at that time, so I actually became a car salesman for a very short period of time. I was bored. It's not that I really like broke or anything like that, but I was bored to death at home. Okay, and then I was never a salesperson, so I kind of take on this. Let me try. Learned a bunch. Okay, about how to deal with strangers, people, how to make sales. It become one of the best experience in my life before I joined IBM. And then, when I go into a job interview, the hiring manager start asking me technical questions about a product, about a database product that I'm going to have. And, I learned a little bit. I have some technical background, but obviously I'm not deep into some of the definition and some of the algorithm of that. To a point that actually halfway of the interview, I say, hey, you know, let's not talk about that. Okay, I'm not going to answer a great question. I can tell you what I've done as a project manager in my previous job. I can tell you how I work with people and things like that. And then he learned that I worked for a car company at that time, and it happens that he also drove the same brand of the car. Okay, so we start talking about this. We start talking about projects. We start talking about people. We start talking about a lot of other things. And then I got opportunity to talk with my second line manager or the future second line manager. Then, you know, turns out okay. And then eventually, and you know what? I thought I bombed the whole thing right after that, but 2 days later they hired me, and then yeah, so it was a very, very interesting experience.
Yeah. And I just wanted to add a plus one to what you said about IBM being a very fair company. Like I feel like, I mean, I'm not trying to be like an IBM advertisement right now, but I have read articles about how, a lot of like discrimination articles at other companies, and they're like these really great companies that you're like, oh, I would love to work there, or like you think you would, and then you hear about their culture and you're like, huh, the grass isn't always greener, and like I have a pretty good situation. So yeah, that's something that I've really appreciated about IBM is like I'm always valued. And I always felt like you, Thomas, especially, you always just like made me feel like I don't know, because you could have been like, oh, I'm a director or executive or something. And some people are a little kind of in their heads about being a director or an executive, but I always felt like you were very approachable and easy to talk to. So
Thank
glad
you.
to,
Thank you.
glad to
Yep.
yeah. So yeah, you kind of touched on this already a bit, but um you I guess just what from since you were a director and you hired people and that kind of thing, just for general about product management, like what educational background or experience does someone need to get into that, and what do you look for?
Well, I would say this, right? So as I said, I came from an engineering background. I'm a pretty technical background person. It was actually a stretch that I was asked to become a product manager. Okay. Now obviously I understand my product because that's a product that I've been part of making in the first 15 years of my journey in IBM. But I was never an MBA. I never didn't study finance or anything like that. Okay. But after these 5 years, I would say this. Okay. I would say as an executive, as a director of a product management, um, there's a few things that you or I would advise anyone when they wanted to come in on that. Okay. First of all, I found that everybody come from a somewhat different background to become a product manager in any given capacity. And not all of them, and actually only a few of them come from a so-called a classic academic background of being a product manager. Okay. A lot of them come from technical background. A lot of them come from a marketing background. A lot of them come from a finance background. People come from different side of the things to become a product manager, because product manager is kind of the leader and the mission control of the whole thing. I think the mindset is really more about entrepreneur, and the mindset is really more about being a business owner. Okay. Um, is very important no matter what kind of product that you are managing or selling. It's really going back to some really fundamental points that you have to think about. Okay. And do not be like overwhelmed by the system, how many parts you have and how many product you're selling. let's boil down to, let's say you open a 1 person or 2 people mom and pop shop. Okay. What are you selling? Okay. How do I buy? What's the price? What's the service? Like, answer these fundamental questions more like a salesperson. Okay. Is actually really what help people. Like, I see 2 type of product management people over time. Some of them become more like a so-called classic product manager who basically focus a lot on the process, focus a lot on how the mechanics of everything is. Okay, nothing wrong with that, but that's a different kind of thing. But if you really want to go further to really make your product thrive, you need to really think about your customer, think of yourself like a user, and spend your time on really empathizing their experience and understanding what they really want. Okay, and that is why you now see a lot more product manager being quite technical. Some of the product manager are actually tester because they say, you know what, I got to be able to use the product, from inside out, top to bottom, before I can actually sell this product, right? And then the experience is not only about the product in itself. Okay, how do you buy? How do you surface? How do you get support? Customer success management is one of the key things that we have. So I think a important and successful product manager doesn't really matter what background they are from. Okay, it's really more about how you look at the people, how you look at your customers, and how you look at to provide them with the best experience. And I think that is really the most important part being a successful product manager. I think it's interesting. It does not require very deep skills in any one of these areas, and sometimes having a very deep skill may become a hindrance of that. So, for example, there are people who's extremely strong in business case. Okay, they can articulate anything about why we have this business. But at the end of the day, if you cannot sell it, if you cannot price it correctly, if you cannot do those things to a point that actually not the 1% of customer, but the rest of the 99% of customer actually understand, then you will not be successful. So it's really more like a mix of many things. It's like, it's Olympic time, right? It's more like, doing the decathlon. Okay, you don't have to be the best in any one of these 10 sports. Okay, but you need to be good overall, and that become a really good product manager. That is how I feel like after these 5 years.
Yeah, kind of a jack of all trades kind of thing, but being good kind of, it's more like horizontally good rather than like that deep vertical,
Yep.
as they say. Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely.
And is that what you look for when you interview people? Is that kind of those kind of people skills and relational skills?
Yeah. So, Rachel, I've been doing obviously a lot of hiring in my life, and obviously, unfortunately, some firing also. Okay, things work out, things doesn't work out. But Thomas' principle in terms of hiring, which is kind of contradicting to a lot of way that we heard a lot of company hiring these days. Um, I focus on personal skills. I focus on attitude. I focus on a emotional commitment about what you promise yourself in terms of excellence on those kind of things, right? I couldn't care less about whether you know the SQL language or whether you have a scientific background of something. I believe those things can be learned. Okay, but I believe that everybody needs to come in with a positive attitude about learning, about fighting the battle together, about working well with everybody. So those are my principle when I hire people. So I hire attitude. I hire good attitude people. I hire people who might think a little bit differently. Okay, but I hire people based on that. Like hard skills, I don't really focus too much. Okay, so so that is kind of what I look at, and especially in a product management role, you'll be interfacing with so many people every day. Okay, how you build your reputation in the industry is actually the number one topic that everybody needs to worry about. And if someone is really just good at something and not really having a good relationship and attitude towards everything that he does or she does, so that's not going to be the kind of people that's going to be successful. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
I was kind of wondering about that. Like, okay, so you're interviewing somebody and you think they're a good fit, but how does somebody who maybe doesn't have that deep technical skill set make it to the interview, I guess? I'm wondering.
Yeah, I think the system right now does have certain amount of I would say, the modern way of filtering people. Okay. I heard that a lot of company, instead of having the HR people looking at it, they even have bots or AI to filter out those things, right? I think, um, I think, depends on what the role is, but I would say in terms of product management, I would say if you have a name through LinkedIn or through relationship or through this kind of video or whatever that you have a name on your industry, people should know about you. You need to find a way to market yourself well beyond the AI or the machine who's going to look at your resume, right? Work for a few people, finding mentor in the industry, um, you know, have the courage of cold calling some CEO or even CIO, CTO to talk to them and find them time. I think those are the key things that, like, it's very accessible right now. The world is very transparent through the LinkedIn, Twitter, and things, I got my fair share of that myself too. So, but I think, I'm always happy and to help, and I'm always happy to talk to new people. So those are the things that I feel that people should do to really, I wouldn't want to say those are trap. I think there are particular job that is requiring good technical skill that's needed. But I think for a product management perspective, having a great network is going to be really, really essential. Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, that's really interesting and good to know, especially for I think earlier people, because I've been talking to a lot of people trying to get into jobs lately, and I'm like, oh, I mean, I don't know. I haven't done a lot of hiring myself, so I think it's interesting. It's just good to know.
Yeah, so one of the few things, maybe a small hint for the public here. Me as a hiring manager, I know things become like, I don't feel a lot of people are doing that enough these days. And maybe one day everybody's doing it, become not useful. But I think recommendation from people, even either through LinkedIn, a short paragraph about those, I actually think it's going to go a long way. Okay. Your public profile around the world is actually going to go a long way, because let's be honest. Okay. Once I know your name, people, like, you are basically in front of the whole world through the internet, right? So, so whatever you do or whatever you don't do, people will know. Okay. And I think that will build an impression. And I think those are the important things that people can do. Look for recommendation from other people that are more public. I think those are the important key to really land a job that you like, and things like that. Like, do not feel that you are always going to be struggle simply because I cannot do this, or I do not know about this. Because I think a lot of hiring manager is really looking for a belief that this person will do well, rather than saying that, oh, it's not a program. It's like, if this, then that. No, it never worked that way, because we are people, right? So yeah.
Yeah, and I've tried to tell people that job descriptions are kind of a wish list. Like it's like I don't think I mean from what I've seen anyway, I don't think everyone's expecting you to know literally everything on there. Is that true?
Yeah, like, just like my job 20 years ago, if I am comparing my knowledge at that time with the job description they're hiring, they will absolutely not hire me at that time. Okay. I would say job description is there because, first of all, it's needed, and also to some extent articulating what is the nature of the work and things like that. I treat it like this way. I do not treat that as a list of requirements. Okay. I actually treat it like a menu when you go in a restaurant. It's all the things that you might be
Ah,
able to do in this, and you don't have to do all of them, because just like you're not going to order all the food on the menu, right? But if you connect with one of the task or particular responsibility in the so-called job description, is like, hey, this burger looks good, like to order them. Okay, I'm going to talk to the waiter or waitress about what this burger is like, and let's talk about it. Like, I would say job interview and finding things like that should more be like a mutual discussion, rather than, I'm dying to put food on the table, I need a job, please give me a job. It's never granted. Okay. it's a mutual discussion and agreement to let you do that, but at the same time, you agree to do that, right? So, it's more like matchmaking than anything. It's not like, I do not want anyone to go into, especially youngster in their first job or things like that, going in there in the mindset that, I'm not trying to say that they should come in cocky and saying that, hey, I'm the best thing that ever happened to you. But I think it's a fair ground in such a way that the company is looking for someone and you're looking for a company, and let's see if it fits. If it doesn't, then we move on to another one. So a lot of people got really discouraged when they got declined about roles. Don't. Okay, there's really no point doing that. So yeah.
Great advice, Thomas. Yeah. I did want to talk about what life is like as a corporate executive. I feel like it's kind of a mysterious thing. I mean, I'm just speaking for myself. And what are some of the things you didn't anticipate or you don't think people realize as part of being an executive?
Um, I think there are few things when I think about this, right? There's a few things that people don't really realize, or maybe they realize but do not understand the extent of that, right? So I think the first thing is that when you become executive and when you become more like so-called, people say it's the dark side, but I say it's really kind of becoming the owner, becoming one of the owners of the company. Your aperture of how you look at the business is completely widened. And a lot of time when staff, and when I was a staff, I did not understand why my boss make a decision the way he or she make those decisions, right? But over time, when you learn about the information that they have and the information and the consideration that they must have on everything, then it all makes sense. Like, even you would or I would make that decision also if you're in that position. So becoming executive enable you to have a much bigger aperture about the industry, about the things that you're facing with customers and with a lot of stuff. So, broaden yourself is really important. And the other thing that people don't really understand, or I don't think executive is getting enough credit about, is that if there's one thing that I as an executive is losing sleep at night about, is my people. Okay, is the people who work for me. Okay, I'm not trying to be emotional or anything like that, but they don't know how much I think of them, and they don't know how much I worry about whether they're happy or not happy at work that day. Okay, maybe it's me, but because at the end of the day, the people is the most important part of the company. It shape up what the culture will be, and you will become the most important part, whether the company is successful or not. Okay, so growing them, okay, making sure they make the company successful with a happy mentality, with a good positive mentality, especially during the last 2 years. But at the same time, for people that are not making it, not doing that, how do you find a way to position them in a more successful position, or maybe even you need to find a way for them to do something else, is hard. It's hard. Okay, putting just like a coach, right? Putting the best people in every single position in a soccer game is not easy. And those are the things that we think a lot about, because we know very well that the company cannot be successful unless everybody is focused and aligned. And those are all the things that we think about all the time. And you naturally think about that, but people management is ongoingly continues going to be the biggest thing in any good executive's mind. That is something that is natural, but people's perception about executives sometimes is that, oh, you know what, they're flying first class, they're in the biggest hotel and things like that. Those are the perks that come with being executive. Yeah, but when they run the business, they're actually really thinking about the team and the people.
That's really interesting to hear. And I think I'm starting to realize that a little bit more and more as I progress in my career, that it's okay to tell your manager that whatever, like a certain task that you're doing is actually pretty draining to you, rather than being something you're good at, or like, I mean, there's always going to be things about your job you don't enjoy, but if like your whole job is just completely draining you, then it's actually, I've found, okay to talk to your manager about that and try to like figure out like what works better for you. And I think that's something that
Yeah,
hard to like,
yeah,
you don't realize, you're like, oh, you don't want to tell your manager you're not like liking something, but then actually your manager wants to know that, I think.
yeah. And you know what? And I tell my and I tell my staff all the time, right? Just like when you vote for your president, just like when you go in protest, telling the world that you don't like something that your government is doing, it's not because you're angry. It's actually because you love the country, and it's actually your responsibility to do that, right? And if that's the case, then my staff, if you're not happy with what I'm giving you to do, is your responsibility to tell me that. Because if you don't love the team or the work that you're doing anymore, then let's not do it. So that is the way that I tell my team all the time. And yeah, so I think that is really how we should do it, and how any successful company has become.
Yeah, that's great. So changing gears a little bit, you started your company Iron Tutor a while ago, but you were doing it part-time, but you recently
Mhm.
made that decision to leave IBM and start doing it full time. And that's a really huge decision. I
Oh,
think you lose a
that
certain
was
amount of security. And yeah, what drove you to make that leap?
that was let me be honest, I told my parents, and I told my wife that, and you know what, there are big big life decisions that you only make a few um in your life, right? For example, getting married, like who you're marrying with, and by the way, Rachel, congratulations.
Oh, thanks.
Very immigration, deciding to move your whole family to another country and starting over is a huge decision. And I have to say, this decision that I made recently is up there. I thought about it for a long time. Okay. One of the trigger point is because I turned a age milestone, last year. Okay. And I am start to really thinking about, you know, what I want to do in the next 10 years of my life. Okay. The way that you think about this is that, you know, by that time, or maybe, I know it's a, I know it sounds bloody negative here, but you know what, by the time I die, okay, in my dying bed, when I look back of what I did, um, between these 10 years, do I want to be continuing doing what I have been doing in the last 20 years, or do I want to do something differently? Okay. I think that is a big realization about from everybody about what they want to do and what they should do. And COVID, unfortunately, is teaching us all a lesson that, we are not invincible. Life is finite. Okay. And you got to do what you got to do. Okay. And probably that is also driving a lot of people thinking about the same thing these 2 years, because these 2 years has been hard for a lot of professionals too. Um, but at the same time, I was really thankful that I and my wife make that decision about 15 years ago to start this. Okay. Um, my second daughter was just born at that time. My wife had some time, and she's not really happy with her job at that time. She's always an entrepreneur because she came from a family of small shops, and my mother-in-law run the small clothing shops at that time. So she's always having the idea of opening a little school for the neighborhood. Okay, so she started. I say, I have a pretty decent stable income at that time. Why don't you try? Okay. Worst case, we're not going to go bankrupt. You can come back and things like that. But at that time, we were also joking, saying that, you know what? Maybe one day these things become so good that I can I can join you. Okay. And I think that is really what happened now. I think there are several factors from a personal perspective and from the market perspective that drive me to make that decision. So first of all, from a personal perspective, as I said, I feel it's the right time for me to do something else. Okay. Number two, I think the company has been healthy. Okay. So that means I'm not going to worry too much about not making the salary I make as an executive in IBM. Okay. Although it's still a substantial amount of money. Okay, but it is what it is. But more importantly, two kids are grown up now. Okay, they're both in college. They seem to be pretty independent, and I'm not worried about them anymore. Okay, so I think that is really the situation personally, and I think from a market perspective, I feel that with COVID and everything, we have more and more young generation that actually need help. From an academic perspective, these 2 years, because of the online learning and a lot of high school and cannot do face-to-face, the way the quality of some of the education has been deteriorating. There are a lot of loopholes in terms of how you get a high score without learning anything, simply because exam is online, homework is online, everything is online. So that means you can just Google everything and find the answer and get a great marks without learning anything. I'm worried about the people going to college these 2 years, okay, because they do not have a very solid background in terms of problem solving skills and those things there. So we see something that we can help the community to improve. We see something that we can teach them better on that. So, so those are the conviction that we have. So that's why we decide to do. And the other thing is that my wife has been a math teacher for her life. She's not expanding herself into science and other subjects in the engineering side. She says she doesn't have the capacity, and she asked me to do so. So yeah. So right now in this school has been here for 15 years. For the first time, we are starting to offer science like chemistry, like physics, and those courses for high school students. So become more comprehensive for them. So so those are the things that we enable the company to do. Right? So those are the things that, like, there are many reasons, but it's still a very tough decision about that. But I think looking back, I think it's the right decision. My day in life is a little bit different now, which we can talk more. But right now, yeah, it was a huge decision. And Rachel, I have to say, people like you and all the people I work with has become one of the hardest part for me to say goodbye to this job. I still talking with plenty of all of you, which I'm really thankful about. Okay, but yeah, not having those fun working with all of you is making this decision very tough.
Yeah, it's definitely a huge transition. And you already sort of hinted at my next question, which is what's a day in the life like for you, and how's it changed due to the pandemic? But you've also had a huge work change too. So yeah, it'd be interesting to just see how it's changed.
Well, so I think especially in these 2 years, our life in a corporate world has been extremely crazy. Okay, and there seems to be endless amount of work that we have to do. And the fact that we're all working from home basically means that we can dedicate ourselves 24/7 doing the work, right? It's extremely tiring, okay? And I'm really thankful that now that in the new role of this company, so first of all, me and my wife own this company. So that means we are allowed to make any kind of decision for the company, okay? But obviously we're responsible for the outcome, okay? But obviously you have more control about that, but at the same time, you have more control about your time. And because of the role that I'm playing right now, I find myself saying no a lot than before, okay? But I feel that even in a big company, even when you have a lot of people surrounding you, I think it's perfectly fine to say no or bring up the topic of what we don't do, okay? I don't think we do it enough in a lot of big company. And turns out that our product lineup become very complicated. We try to make everybody happy and things like that. So I think the day in life is definitely having more control, but more importantly, I have some time to really feedback and really sit down to really think more about what decision I want to make and taking a little bit time of doing that. So, rather than a lot of knee-jerk reaction and fast pace and things like that. But you know what? There are some decisions you just got to think through. Okay. And I think those are the things that I'm now able to do with a more simple business, definitely. Okay. But that is that. But I would advise everybody, no matter where you are, learn how to say no. Okay. And I'm not good at that. Okay. But everybody should learn and really learn to make decisions based on your secondary or tertiary thinking, meaning that you think twice or think three times before you make that decision, rather than just, getting things done quickly. It might not work very well all the time.
Yeah, like getting things done, but it doesn't actually go towards your higher objective is not necessarily actually productive.
Exactly. You need to think about your direction that, because you know what, if you're not towards the right direction, no matter how fast you drive, you're not going to get there, right? So yeah,
Yeah.
yes, yeah.
Well, we've had a really great discussion about work, but I want to kind of change gears a little bit and just talk about life in general. So, first question about that is, well, what do you do outside of work and all this to decompress?
First of all, just like everybody, not much because not really a lot of time after eating, sleeping, and working on that. But I would say, most of the time is really just music. And some of my friend knows me, but not all of them. I am the so-called, those crazy audiophile that you spend a lot of money on stereo systems. Okay, so yeah, my wife hates that, but she allowed me to do so. So so I'm those kind of people. I love classical music. I show you a picture. I traveled to Vienna, and when I was in those sales conference, I make sure that I go at night to a concert hall to see the best orchestra play. So those things. So those are really what I do here. So reading music and sound system is really one of the things that I love doing. I love playing golf, but I don't play very well. And in Toronto, it's only half the year you can play. So those are the things that I do here. But the past 20 years has been raising the kids, working, and so I don't think a lot of people was able to do a lot. I love to be able to read a little bit more. I wasn't really, maybe I'm just lazy. Okay, but I think I'm picking up more readings recently. So those are the things that I try to do to decompress.
That's great. Do you create music, or are you like you're big into listening to it?
I'm big at listening to it. I used to play piano, and the other good thing is that one of my daughters is actually going into music. She's studying music in her college right now, classical music. So I actually learn a lot from what she's doing, and we go to concert together sometimes. Okay, so those are the things I do. Okay, so I am not good at composing. Okay, but but I'm just enjoying music more time. I still play piano a little bit. Okay, but so those are the things I do.
That's great that you can have something like that you can share with your daughter, like a very shared interest. That sounds fun.
At the very least, being able to talk the same language is already very, very good. Okay, because sometimes when I drive her back to school after the weekend, we can talk about what she's doing, what pieces she's playing, and the fact that I actually know those composers and know those pieces is really good. It helps the father-daughter relationship also a lot.
Yeah, that's always a good thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it sounds like mentorship is a big interest of yours, and what do you enjoy about it?
I think there's a few things. I think the biggest thing that drive me to do more mentoring is number one, I feel very lucky that I met several people in my life that they are my mentors. Like I feel I owe them, and I feel I owe the world something in terms of giving back. I think that is like, it's like a torch, right? You pass to your next generation, and they are graciously enough to teach me and to tell me the hint about life and to tell me what I should do and should not do. So I would like to be able to bring this to the next generation. And mentorship is like always mutual, right? It's not like someone that your mentor is telling you what you should not do. It's a discussion. Is learning about what the mindset of the new generation of people also. Okay, so I think this is a really good relationship as long as both of them are sincere in terms of sharing with each other. And I think that is really I really enjoy I really enjoy doing that. I feel a lot of satisfaction if there's even if you talk to a person for an hour, and if 2 words out of this 1 hour that you inspire them, I think that is really something important. And and the feeling of several years later when someone still remember what you said that day and saying that, hey, I live by that principle now. This is really good. That's priceless. That is probably one of the most satisfying feeling that you can get.
Yeah. And what would you say makes a mentorship relationship successful? Does it have to be something formal? What would you say?
Well, I would actually go to the other extreme and saying that it needs to be informal. Okay, so there's a few things, right? Now there's a few ground rules. For example, your mentor should not be really having a conflicting vested interest on you. So normally you don't become the mentor of your staff, it's always a separate organization and things like that. But other than that, um, I never like the kind of arrangement of, hey, hey, Rachel, this Thomas guy is going to be your mentor. You don't even know who I am. Okay. And then hey, you're going to have a monthly meeting with him, talk for an hour, and you better prepare some topic you're talking about. No, it doesn't work that way, right? It's a friendship. Okay. I would say all the mentors I have in my life, none of them are arranged. Okay, all of them are the people we work together, we know each other, and then a few months or few years later, I move on or they move on to other role, and they say, "Hey, why don't we keep in touch?" And as long as we keep the initiative of pinging each other, say hi, there's always things to talk about. So I think I really treasure these kind of good relationship, and this is the way it works. It feels very natural. It feels very natural in such a way that two people just start talking without even saying that, oh, it's an arranged meeting or things like that. So those are all the things. Like I remember every single mentor when we start having this relationship is not arranged by a third party. It's just like me telling, for example, Mark, right? Mark is my mentor for many years. He used to be a manager at that time, but after that, I say, Mark, why don't we go for a beer? Why don't we just talk? There's a few things that there's a few things in the team that I don't know what to do. Why don't you tell me how you would do it and things like that? And then it goes on. So yeah, so yeah, I actually love the informal relationship. I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, and then you're actually approaching them when you need to talk about something rather than like forcing some conversation. Yeah.
Yeah. You don't talk for the sake of talk or that. The connection is built naturally. So that's
Mhm.
good. Yeah.
Yeah. So getting a little more personal, I'm curious. I always like kind of asking this. How did you and your wife meet?
Oh, okay. So it's a pretty typical story. We're in university. So we know each other in the first 2 months of university. She's in electrical engineering. I was in mechanical engineering. So I don't know. We start dating like 2 months later, and then yeah, and then we dated for a long time, like 10 years before we get married. But that is that. It's a pretty simple story. Um, yeah. So we were together back in university. Yeah, yeah.
Nice. Where did you do university in Canada or in Hong Kong?
We did university in Toronto. Okay,
Okay.
so we went to U of T. And my daughter's in Toronto also. So yeah, so that was the school that we all went to. I didn't know her from before. We weren't in the same high school. Yeah, so I just met her. I just met her. Yeah.
Yeah, and so like a couple months ago, I had written this article on Medium about changing my last name, and you actually reached out to me, and you said like you commented on how women in your culture don't change their last names, which I thought was really interesting. And so I was just kind of curious, like what you've noticed about that, and but I did want to like clarify: do children take on the last name of the father typically?
So I would say for most cases, children take on the father's last name. Okay. There has been cases because of the family tree or so that there are kids taking on mother's last name. It's rare, but it happens. For example, my neighbor back in Hong Kong, there are actually three brother sisters. They have different last name. Two of them is the father's last name. The third one is mother's last name. Okay. Um, yeah. So I think there are two things. So I think in the Chinese culture, it's not that we don't do it, but I think most of the people will not do it to the extent that they change their passport and all those kind of stuff. Okay. They have no problem being called Mrs. your husband's last name, but they will not change their ID card, driver's license, or passport into that new name. Okay. First of all, it's not really a huge tradition of doing that. It started these days. Sometimes people put both of the names becoming their last name. Okay, it's getting a little bit more popular. Nothing against it, so it's all good. And without changing your last name, there are going to be confusion. So, for example, when my daughter was born, okay, the nurse bring the daughter to me and say, "Congratulations, Mister, my wife's last name." So it happens.
It
But
goes
I
both
think,
ways.
yeah, but I think I actually talked to my wife about this. Okay, not that I want her to change her last name, but I say, okay, so why? What is your mindset about not doing that, right? She has she's a pretty strong woman. Okay, so let's just get that out of the way first. Okay, but she does say that she feels that although getting married is a significant event, okay, but she look at that, which is exactly the way I look at marriage also. It's more like a partnership, okay? It's more like two people coming together to build a family with trust and with respect to each other. But that does not mean a person will become another person, okay? That does not mean she will suddenly becoming a person like me or doing all the things just for me. She would like to have her own space, okay? Not only financially, not only career-wise, but in terms of space, in terms of being a human being. She's very firm that she would say, I have my own thinking. I'm a professional myself. I am who I am, okay? And as a husband, I respect that, okay? And then she said that if that's the case, then why would I, or why would I be changing my last name on that? Like I did not become someone, okay? I'm still who I am. The day after I get married, it's not like I completely become a different person, right? And I don't want her to be, right? So I never expect her to change her name at all, okay? And people call her by her name, okay? And yeah, so it's like, yeah, there are confusion. I remember more than one time when we go on vacation in the border, we were asked whether we are actually married or not. Okay, so these things happen, but we just say we are married. Okay, so it's something that I respect based on her choice. Okay, I have no problem either way, but I think her rationale is sound as an independent and as an individual. So that's that. Now, I'm not trying to say that if anyone decide to do so, suddenly become a different person or you just fell into your husband's family or things like that. People make their own choice, okay? But if that is her rationale to drive her to make that decision of not doing anything, I respect that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I like that. I like that, her reasoning.
Yeah. And also not to mention that you mentioned your husband's last name is a little bit hard to pronounce.
Yeah.
But that is a different discussion. So
Yeah, I've definitely taken for granted having a relatively easy for English speaker name to pronounce anyway, name like Rachel Miles, but then learning the Shia Chich was like a lot of practice for me. I had to practice.
You still have hard time pronouncing that name now?
I had to slow it down. Yeah, no, sometimes I don't say it. Like I don't know, I just try to say it fast or something. It is a little hard, but I think I got it. Yeah, I was kind of curious. So yeah, you're an immigrant here, and I'm curious to know, like, and now I've married an immigrant, and so it's and when you become a family, you have traditions from your home country. And I noticed that the logo of your company has Chinese characters on it, and I'm just curious to know, like, what are some of the things that your family does to honor your heritage while you're living in a completely different country.
Yeah, so I would absolutely like bring up, like, not trying to advertise Toronto a little bit too much, but Toronto is a very special city in North America. Okay, I've been to a lot of places in North America and around the world. Okay, but Toronto is indeed special. So I don't know whether okay, statistics is telling us that we have more than half the people in Toronto that are actually born outside of Canada. So, so that means we are having more than half of people in this city that is actually not born in this country. They are not from here. They are from somewhere else. They've gone through the immigration. They restart their life, okay, and they choose Toronto to be this place. And I think simply because there's an overwhelming large amount of people like that, okay, Toronto become a really multicultural city, and in different area there are definitely groups of people that are living together and honoring the culture. So next time you come to Toronto, I'll show you around. Okay, you will see restaurant, you will see places, and you don't go to Chinatown to see Chinese, or you don't go to Little Italy to see Italian. There, it's everywhere. You can just drive down the street, maybe 2 blocks next to the lab. Okay, there is a tons of Chinese restaurant, there's tons of Indian restaurant, there's tons of places that you do here, and the good thing is that, for example, my mom, who doesn't really speak English, she has no problem navigating her life around here because there are enough amount of Chinese speaking people here. Um, the reason of the company using a Chinese character in the logo is more about the culture of school and tutoring, because after school tutoring is a big thing in Asian country. If you read anything in terms of statistics, you probably see that probably more than 90% of people in China and Hong Kong go to after school tutoring. In Korea, it's actually 99.9%. Like basically everybody study after school. Okay, so it's a big business. Although our students is a mix of many culture, but it's still mostly dominating in the Asian culture. So having people from them seeing the character is probably something that we do to help the business. But Toronto is a very interesting it's an interesting place, right? You see this place in Canada, okay, in Toronto, but it's really a great mix of people from everywhere, and they all live in harmony. Okay, yeah, so it's a very interesting place. Yeah.
Oh, well, I've really enjoyed catching up with you, Thomas. It's been really great. How can people get in touch with you if they'd like, or your business?
So we have our website. We actually recently revived that. So your simple is irontutor.com. Okay, so that is something. I'm pretty open on LinkedIn. I think I have 2,000 connections now. So feel free to send me. Now I know, Thomas Chu is probably there are probably 500 Thomas Chu on LinkedIn. Okay, but you should be able to find me with Thomas Chu IBM. Okay, and anyone want to connect with me, I would love to talk, and especially folks in Toronto. I think anyone who is in their career need any helps, or need any mentorship or things like that, I would love to help. To me, I'm always a very curious person, and I would love to meet new people. So those are the things that I wanted to make sure I contribute to the community that way. So yeah, I'm actually having another new immigrant related interview lining up for next week. So I've been keeping myself busy on that. So it's
Yeah.
good. Yeah.
Well, thank you again, Thomas. It's been really great.
Yeah,
Really
and Rachel, thank you. I think this is very interesting, and I wish you all the best in this effort. Looks like it's going well, and I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you today.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss a single show. Interested in being on the show? Know someone that might be a good fit? Use the nomination form in the description.